Mail time. Due to the disappointment in my last video of not being able to find that specific cable, more specifically the plug on the end of the cable, I have purchased one. Now, unfortunately, it only comes in this sort of specific form. It goes from D-tap, which usually plugs into some sort of camera battery, then it comes out to the plug that I need, with this little box in the middle, which I'm assuming just smooths out the power, maybe makes sure that it is constant. It allows an input of 14 to 20 volts and outputs 12 volts at 2 amps, which is exactly what the camera recommends the input power to be. So I'm going to cut this wire off that I just paid $25 for and solder it onto my own circuits so that I can make this little battery expansion pack thing for my camera to allow it to record for many hours, even though I am yet to record a video on it. Snip, snip. Now, to get the most out of this little kit I'm putting together, I'm going to need a couple of specific plugs. First, of course, is the plug that plugs into the camera. This will be supplying the camera with the 12 volts, 2 amps. Then the next will be another XT60 connector, which will allow me to essentially plug in miscellaneous devices. I've got a couple of lights that I've rewired so that it takes this plug. But then the next plug, of course, will be, well, basically a plug like this, which will allow me to plug in screens and another couple of light types I have. Though, I need to find a couple at very specific lengths. The first one needs to be about this long, but then the second one needs to be about 3 times as long, so that it can come all the way from the back of the camera, which could be all the way back here, run to the front, down along a rig, around and out to the screen, which will actually be in front of my face. So I've got to be quite specific on the length, because I don't want it too long, but of course I don't want it too short. Here's a couple good candidates, actually. This might be a little bit overkill though. Admittedly, I'm not 100% sure this cable is the right length, but the combination of that length and this length, and just simply being able to move this around on the camera body, does mean that I will be able to put it in the right place. These all feel like they are adequate lengths, which will only need a small amount of majiggering around to make sure that they're going into the right places.
Turn this shit up. Yo. Switch.
that's this part done. I even managed to add in this little voltmeter here, if you happen to see that addition at the end there. With this part of the project complete, we're now finally able to utilize this lightly modified battery, which is supplying us with 24 volts right here, coming into our DC to DC step-down converter, giving us a clean 12 volts out of there with a capability of hitting 10 amps. Now I can plug this into our camera right here via this barrel connector. As you can see, no battery down in there. I'll switch this on, and hey, there we go, powering up, running solely off of this battery. Now we've got the extra barrel connectors here, so I can plug in this light that is up on top here and light the way. So that allows me to use a light in obviously low light situations, maybe a nighttime shoot or something like that. Of course, I could add a ring light or something else to the mix. And I've still got another barrel connector right here, which means I could also add an external monitor. I'm thinking something like a Atmos Ninja V Plus, which would then allow me to record RAW. I think it's like 5.7K 12-bit RAW. Though I'm still yet to get a file out of this. I don't use this camera because the one battery I have is limited to an hour. That said, the memory cards that I have in here are also limited to 63 minutes. So I definitely need to get around to getting another handful of memory cards or something for it. I really want this to be a run and gun setup, something where I can easily just chuck that battery in my bag, plug it in, and I'm ready to go. Just camera on the shoulder, everything I need, record for as long as I need. I don't want to be limited by that sort of things. Here I'm going to be conducting a little bit of a test. You see, I just want to check out some FFmpeg encoding and just see how these select few security cameras that I've pulled out of stock that are probably never really going to get used otherwise. And I just want to see how well they keep time and see if that's anywhere usable enough for me to use to make a video that I have in mind. This will be able to give me some alternate angles with an easier way of dealing with the files. These three cameras I have selected are all PoE powered, so I just need to plug them all in, and then I'll just aim them all at this sign here and start assigning them roles. And by that I mean I'm just going to start an FFmpeg encode and start them recording, and ideally that recording will hopefully smooth out any weird timing issues and keep time consistently throughout the file and not skip frames and stuff. I mean, if it skips a frame, I'm hoping it doesn't mend that by treating it as if it never existed and just closing that gap. I would rather have a skipped frame where it holds the previous frame so that it will stay in time. Because the current issue with using security cameras, at least how I've been doing it, running it through the NVR, is that they slowly drift out of time because they'll drop a frame here and there. And so their audio is out of sync and the video is out of sync. But each frame and, I don't know, I guess a few seconds of audio does have a bit of a timestamp on it. So when you do jump to certain places on the NVR in the recording, everything is all synced up. So I'm hoping running this through a Windows computer is going to be able to keep everything in sync and appropriately timed. But we'll see. Alright, and that's all 3 cameras set up. I'm just going to quickly jump in and check some of the camera specific settings on each of them, make sure they're set to the correct settings for this little test, and then I'm going to write some code so that I can have them actually recording on my Windows server. Alright, so I've set up some sensors on my Home Assistant server which will be keeping track of those cameras, or at least the process that is active to record them, where I'm using a Wim query and then looking for an FFmpeg process and then looking one that is titled accordingly to the cameras. Now, I've got all 3 of them set to record. They're all recording, and there seems to be a file there that is building up. So I'm going to kill the process. So I've sent the command to stop. All those processes have all equally stopped, and let's see if opening the file is going to display anything. Oh, and it seems to have displayed something. Having a quick look at the codec information, 25 frames per second at 1440p. That's a good look so far. Let's check the next one. Codec information, 12 frames per second at 1440p. Okay, so that's something we're going to have to look into. Close out of that one and let's check this last one. Tools, codec information, 15 frames per second at 1440p. Okay, so obviously something funky is going on there, but we now know that at least one camera is running at its top frame rate of 25 frames per second. These other 2 cameras, I'll need to go into them and adjust some settings and hopefully harness 25 frames per second from them so that I can begin a frame rate and time test to make sure that they are running at the correct frame rate the whole time and staying in time with the real world. Alright, so I've found that this camera here will not go above 12 frames per second no matter what resolution it's in. But these other 2 are happily sitting at 25 frames per second. So after work today, I'll change this one out and we'll start working on finding another camera that is willing to hit the frame rates that I require. Since this security camera has decided it's not going to exceed 12 frames per second, even though its setting specifically indicates that it is capable of that in some resolutions layout, let's just go grab the whole box of them. I know I'm only looking for about 3 or 4 of them, but I thought I'd pull out all of these to check out, especially a couple that don't quite have cases, because in a few instances I am going to need to just completely remove the case so that it can fit where I'm thinking I'm going to put it. Alright, so after hours of tediously going through each and every camera to make sure all of the settings align correctly so that they can output the appropriate format, as well as making sure everything was set to the correct IP addresses, because for some reason these cameras don't like interacting with DHCP at all, and sometimes they won't even listen to themselves when I set a static IP on them. They just decide, oh, let's start using DHCP now, and let's use a different MAC address. These cameras are insane, so I've had to manually set inside each of them, as well as in my router, the IP address for every single camera, and name everything and make sure everything's well labeled, because I know that at some point something's going to go funky and it's going to screw everything up. That aside, I finally picked out the 6 cameras which are able to output a decent resolution at 25 frames per second. Now, it is at a 4:0 ratio for, I think, pretty much all of them. There might be one that's a 4:0, which I don't really plan on cropping in on any of these cameras anyway, but there may be a couple that are actually quite capable where I can crop in. Now, I've got them sitting here looking at both a clock, which, is that the right time? 11:43? Which is pretty much the right time. And then I've got my laptop there on its side doing a really basic frame test where it's showing this little doodad at 60 frames per second, 30 frames per second, and 15 frames per second. And it's just a simple little alien going across the screen with a starry background. This test is mostly for monitors so that you can see if they're doing any bad sort of screen tearing, see what their contrast and their pixel response time is like. But it's also just as useful for this. Immediately, straight off the bat, I have noticed that camera C here seems to keep stopping and hanging up on it. But it doesn't always indicate from the NVR system that it's a disconnected camera. So I'm just hoping here that, I don't know, maybe something's just sort of stumbling, or I don't know. I'm just hoping that it's not going to be an issue and that the server is going to be able to record everything fine, because all this is running through that NVR that we set up in that little locked money box with a 2 terabyte hard drive and the single network connection going to it and powering it over PoE. That's what all this is running on right now. And soon I'll start doing tests so that it's all running on the server.
Super quick mail time. Balaclava. A new phone charger.
Now back to this mess I have made for myself. After spending hours programming and coding and getting everything to also communicate with Home Assistant so that I could monitor everything as I go, I've got everything set up here in the wardrobe looking at the screen ready for the test. I'm able to trigger everything to record on Home Assistant, making sure everything starts recording at about the same time. I leave everything running for about 40-ish minutes, but I did forget to mention,
I have a bat file that will convert those files into a usable Premiere Pro safe MP4 file.
Let me explain. When I hit record, the system starts building an MKV file, that is the raw data essentially coming from the cameras and being saved on the server. Now this works in VLC Media Player, but Premiere Pro is not interested in working with this file at all. So, in order to be able to actually use the files that are produced from this whole crazy method I've come up with, I have to convert them from an MKV file and re-encode them as an MP4 file, which takes a lot of effort. Here I have a chart showing those processes. As you can see, the first 40 minutes is the 40 minutes of the camera's recording, and then the rest of the time is the re-encoding process. It has to go through each individual camera, re-encoding the entire file and spitting that file out so that I can actually use it, which ended up taking far longer than it would take for me to take an SD card out of a camera and copy-paste that file over, which is the exact process I'm trying to avoid and jump over to try and streamline everything. But this isn't working.
Because of the setup, the network was heavily saturated, which even caused other devices on the network to crash out, because all of these cameras were running at their full resolution and full frame rate and recording on both the server and a network video recorder. The MP4 files alone take up 20.9 gig. And that's with Cam C, the third camera, dropping out after about 40 seconds. So technically, we're only talking about 5 cameras here that were recording for 40 minutes, and only a couple of them at 25 frames per second, while 2 of them were at 10 frames per second. The original MKV files, that only accounts for 6 gigabytes. So in total, I've got about 27 gigs sitting there just in testing these cameras, while 2 of those files, the CamC MKV and the CamC MP4, were only about 40 seconds long. So for the most part, this project idea setup has more or less failed. Whilst I have all these files, I might as well answer the question, could I have, assuming everything else worked well, used these cameras as a multi-cam setup that would actually stay in sync?
Let's set a starting time of 2:34 on the dot. We'll let about 35 minutes pass and hold. Quite surprisingly, only 2 cameras seem to have drifted out of sync. Cam A has drifted out by about 7 seconds, while Cam E has drifted out by about 2 seconds. While the rest of them, excluding Cam C of course, which died after about 40 seconds, seem to be holding their time quite well, which may be thanks to it being encoded on the server. But the other side of that is that Cam A ended up only running at 20 frames per second, while Cam B was at 10 frames per second. The small amount of time Cam C worked, it was at 25 frames per second, while Cam D was also at 25, as well as E, but F reported being at 25 frames per second, at least in the MKV file, but in the final MP4 file that was converted at supposedly lossless quality, meaning it tried to not alter any of the data in the file at all, it only rendered out at 10 frames per second. Now, that could be maybe some sort of mistake on my part, but the code that was run on all of them was exactly the same and completely automated. So there may be some other issue that happened during the recording which caused it to drop from 25 frames per second at the start down to 10 frames per second after a little while, and the encoder would have normalized that and just locked everything down to 10 frames per second.